never come back. You are no longer part of this family.
Mom, please let me explain. I have nowhere else to go.
They told me to leave before the storm got worse. My own mother handed me my coat at the door of my sister's engagement party and said, "You're embarrassing us, Ren. Just go." Lightning cracked over Millbrook Lane as I stood on the porch in a thin blue dress, rain soaking through my hair within seconds, and not one person in that house, not my father, not my sister, not a single cousin, came out to stop me. I stood there for a long moment waiting for anyone to change their mind. No one did. What none of them knew was that the man I'd married 8 months earlier, the quiet nobody they mocked at every holiday dinner, was about to pull up in a car worth more than my father's entire house. And when he stepped out into that storm and looked at what my family had done to me, everything they thought they knew about their family and about me was about to change forever. Stick with me till the end, because what happened next inside those gates was the kind of revenge you don't forget, and it didn't come with shouting or slam doors. Came quietly, the way real power always does. My name is Ren Ashford, 26 years old, the middle daughter in a family that never once looked at me like I mattered. I wasn't the pretty one growing up, not in the way my older sister Paige was, golden hair, easy laugh, the kind of girl teachers remembered by name. I wasn't the baby of the family either, the role that went to my younger brother Colton, who could do no wrong in my mother's eyes no matter how many times he wrecked a car or dropped out of another program. I was just Ren, the one in the middle, the one who got good grades nobody asked about, the one who worked 2 jobs through college while Paige had hers paid for in full. That night in the rain was the night I stopped trying to earn a seat at their table and started building a table of my own. But to understand how far that table had to be built, you have to go back 3 years, to a Tuesday that felt like every other Tuesday, at a small coffee shop 2 blocks from the accounting firm where I answered phones for $14 an hour and dreamed quietly of a life that felt like it belonged to me. The man who walked into that coffee shop wore a plain gray hoodie and scuffed white sneakers, nothing that would make anyone look twice. He ordered a black coffee, fumbled his wallet out of his back pocket, and dropped it on the tile floor. I bent down and picked it up before he could, handed it back, and he thanked me with a smile that seemed almost surprised by its own honesty. We ended up talking for 20 minutes about nothing important, the traffic on Route 9, how bad the coffee actually was, a golden retriever he used to have named Biscuit who'd passed away the year before. He asked for my number the way nervous teenagers do, not the way men who are used to getting everything they want usually do. His name was Grant Calloway. I didn't know then and wouldn't know for months that Grant owned 3/4 of a logistics and technology holding company his late father had built from a single rented warehouse outside Cleveland decades earlier. He never once mentioned it, not on our first date at a diner near my apartment, not on our 5th date at a free outdoor concert, not even 6 months in, when he told me he loved me under the string lights strung across my building's tiny courtyard. He told me later, much later, that he had wanted, just once in his adult life, to be loved for exactly who he was and nothing else. Every woman before me, he said, had known the number attached to his name before she'd known his favorite song. My family, meanwhile, treated me the way they always had. My sister Paige had married into money the way my mother approved of, publicly obviously, with a ring you could see from across a room. Her fiancé and soon husband was the son of a well-known surgeon in town, a family whose last name opened doors at every country club within 30 miles. My mother, Carol Ashford, introduced Paige at every family gathering like a trophy she'd personally polished. She introduced me, when she remembered to introduce me at all, as, "And this is Ren, she's still finding her footing," as if I were a college freshman instead of a working adult with rent and bills and a life of my own. Grant proposed on a rainy Sunday in October, no velvet ring box, no restaurant reservation, no grand gesture at all, just him on one knee in the middle of my cramped kitchen, holding a ring he'd apparently carried around in his jacket pocket for 2 full weeks, working up the nerve. He said he didn't want to spend one more year of his life not being my husband. I said yes before he even finished the sentence, laughing and crying at the same time while our takeout went cold on the counter behind us. I invited my whole family to the wedding, sent the invitations myself, months in advance, hand-addressed each envelope because I wanted it to feel personal, wanted them to feel wanted. My mother said the date simply didn't work with her schedule. My father mentioned something vague about a work trip he couldn't move, though he'd never once turned down a golf outing for Paige's engagement events. Paige herself sent a card in the mail with $50 tucked inside and a note that read, "Have fun," in her looping handwriting. as though I were heading off to a school dance and not marrying the man I planned to spend my life with. Grant never once complained about my family's absence, not even quietly, not even to comfort me. He simply held my hand at the small courthouse ceremony we ended up having instead, just the two of us and two employees from the clerk's office serving as witnesses, and told me that from that day forward, I would never again have to stand alone in a room that didn't want me in it. I remember thinking foolishly that he was just being kind. I didn't yet understand how literally he meant it. What my family didn't know, what almost no one outside Grant's small, tightly guarded inner circle knew, was that 11 days before our courthouse wedding, Grant Calloway had quietly closed a deal that made the front page of two major business publications. Calloway Holdings had acquired a controlling stake in one of the largest shipping technology firms on the East Coast, a deal worth more money than I could fully picture in my head, even after he explained it to me twice. Grant kept his name off most of the press releases whenever legally possible. He liked walking through grocery stores without anyone recognizing him. He liked, more than almost anything else in his life, that I had fallen in love with him completely before I ever knew what he was worth on paper. I kept his secret too, at first because it was his story to tell on his own timeline, and later, if I'm being fully honest, because a small tired part of me wanted to see exactly how my family would treat me if they genuinely believed I'd married a nobody with an ordinary office job. The answer, I would come to learn over the following year, was not well at all. Over the next year of marriage, I watched my family quietly fold me out of every important moment, one small slight at a time, the kind of thing that's almost impossible to point to directly but impossible to stop feeling. Paige's engagement dinner sat me at the far end of the table, near the swinging kitchen door where the servers kept bumping my chair. My mother forgot to mention my second wedding anniversary at Sunday dinner, while spending nearly 20 full minutes describing Paige's new kitchen renovation, down to the brand of the refrigerator. My father asked Grant more than once in that flat, appraising voice men use when they're quietly sizing someone up, "So what exactly is it you do again?" Grant always answered the same simple way. "Business, sir. A little bit of everything." My father would nod slowly, clearly unimpressed, and change the subject back to Paige's husband's medical residency. I begged Grant once quietly in the car after a family dinner where my mother had introduced him to a neighbor as Ren's husband. "He does something with computers, I think." I asked him if any of it bothered him, if he ever wanted to just tell them the truth and watch their faces change. He just reached over, kissed my forehead at a red light and said, "Let them think whatever they want to think for now. One day it won't matter one bit what they thought." I didn't fully understand yet how much weight was sitting quietly behind that one sentence. There were other moments too, smaller ones that added up. My mother once forgot to save me a plate at a holiday dinner, then acted surprised I was upset. Paige asked me in front of her future in-laws if Grant and I were doing okay financially. Her voice pitched just loud enough for the table to hear, then laughed it off as a joke when my face fell. My father skipped my birthday dinner for a work event that, I later found out, had been optional. Every single time, Grant simply held my hand under the table, or squeezed my shoulder, and told me the same thing in different words. None of this would matter forever. The final invitation came in June, Paige's engagement party, held at my parents' newly renovated home on Millbrook Lane, the kind of sprawling house my mother had always dreamed of owning and had finally managed to afford, at least partially, through the generosity of Paige's fiancé's family. I was told, almost as an afterthought over a brief phone call, that Grant and I were welcome to come, as long as we didn't make things awkward. I should have known then, hearing that exact phrasing, exactly what kind of night it was going to be. The house was lit up like something out of a magazine spread when we arrived that evening. String lights strung in careful rows across the backyard, a hired catering staff moving smoothly through the crowd with trays of champagne flutes and tiny appetizers, a jazz trio set up near the pool playing something soft and expensive sounding. My mother greeted Paige's fiancé's parents at the door with a hug that lasted a full 10 seconds and a compliment about their travel plans to Tuscany. She greeted me with a tight, brief smile and a whispered reminder, before I'd even taken off my coat, to not talk too much about yourself tonight. It's Paige's day, remember. Grant, dressed simply as he almost always was, stood beside me near the drinks table while my father's business partner asked him, loudly enough for a small cluster of guests to overhear, what kind of car he drove. Grant answered honestly and simply that he mostly took a plain sedan to work most days. Someone in the group laughed, a short, dismissive sound. My mother's face flushed with something caught between embarrassment and irritation, and she quickly steered the conversation toward Paige's fiancé's new luxury SUV instead, describing its features in loving detail. Then Paige, 3 glasses of champagne into the evening, climbed the porch steps and made an announcement to a backyard that had gone quiet enough to hear every word clearly. She thanked her fiancé's parents warmly for their generosity, for actually being people who provide for their kids, and then turning and looking directly at me with a small careless laugh added, "Not everyone in this family married up, but hey, that's okay. Some people just aren't as lucky as others, right?" A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the crowd. The backyard went quiet in that particular way that means everyone heard exactly what was said, and is now waiting to see what happens next. My face went hot with humiliation. Grant's hand found mine steady and firm, but before either of us could say a single word in response, the sky above Millbrook Lane split open with the first real crack of thunder in weeks, and the rain began to fall in heavy, sudden sheets, sending the whole party scrambling for cover. Everyone scattered toward the house at once, laughing and shrieking about their ruined hair and soaked dresses, grabbing half-empty champagne glasses on their way inside. I stood frozen near the bottom of the porch steps, humiliation still burning hot across my face and chest, when my mother suddenly grabbed my elbow, not gently, and pulled me toward the side gate instead of the main door everyone else was pushing through. "Mom, what are you doing?" I asked, rain already soaking straight through my dress and running down the back of my neck. "You need to go home, Ren," she said, not quite meeting my eyes, her voice tight and rushed. "You've made things awkward enough for one night. Just let Paige have her moment, please. Just go." I looked past her shoulder, toward the warm, glowing windows of the house, toward my father standing just inside the doorway with a drink in his hand, watching all of this happen and saying absolutely nothing, toward Paige already laughing again with her fiancé's family as if the whole exchange had never occurred. My mother pressed my damp coat into my hands, said something about calling me tomorrow, and shut the side gate behind me with a metal click that felt louder than the thunder. I stood alone on the dark, empty street as the storm broke fully open above me, lightning splitting the sky in long white cracks, thunder rattling the windows of every parked car lining the block. Rain plastered my hair to my face and soaked through the thin fabric of my dress within seconds. I didn't cry, not at first. I just stood there stunned, feeling 26 years old and about 6 years old at the exact same time. Then, with shaking, rain-slick hands, I pulled out my phone and called the one person who had, in my entire life, always chosen me first, without hesitation, without condition. "Grant," I said when he picked up on the second ring, my voice cracking despite myself. "Can you come get me?" He didn't ask what happened. He didn't ask why I was standing alone on a dark, storming street instead of safely inside a party. He simply said, in a voice that was calm but unmistakably alert, "I'm on my way, Ren. Stay right there." And the steady certainty in those 5 words was the first genuinely warm thing I had felt in almost an hour. 12 minutes later, headlights swept down Millbrook Lane. Not one car but 3 sleek black SUVs moving in tight formation, engines cutting cleanly through the noise of the storm. They pulled up directly in front of my parents' house, hazard lights blinking against the rain, and Grant stepped out of the middle vehicle straight into the downpour, wearing a suit I had genuinely never once seen him wear before. The kind of suit that is clearly cut for a specific person's exact measurements, not bought off any rack. He crossed the lawn toward me without a single moment of hesitation, ignoring the rain completely, and by the time he reached me, half the party had already spilled back out onto the covered porch to see what all the commotion outside was about. He didn't look at any of them. He shrugged his jacket off and settled it over my shoulders, framed my face gently in both his hands, checking me over, and asked only, "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" It was my father who finally found his voice from the porch, calling out over the sound of the rain. "Grant? What exactly is all this?" Grant turned toward him slowly, unhurried, one arm still wrapped protectively around me. "This," he said, gesturing calmly toward the 3 cars, toward the driver already jogging up with a large umbrella, toward himself standing soaked in a suit that cost more than most people's cars, "is who I actually am. I let all of you believe otherwise for a long time because Ren asked me early on to keep our life private, and honestly because I never once needed your approval to know exactly what I have in your daughter. But I just watched you stand in that doorway with a drink in your hand, and do absolutely nothing while her own mother pushed her out into a storm. That, I refused to stay quiet about. My mother's face had gone the color of old chalk. One hand pressed flat against her chest. Grant Calloway, she repeated slowly, the name visibly clicking into place from some business article headline she'd clearly half-read once, months earlier, without ever connecting it to her own son-in-law. You're the Calloway. From Calloway Holdings. I am, Grant said simply, his voice even, offering no further explanation, no softening, no apology. Paige pushed her way through the small crowd gathered on the porch, mascara running in dark streaks down her rain-dampened cheeks, staring first at the cars, then at the driver holding the umbrella, then at Grant, as though she were seeing him clearly for the very first time in 8 months. This whole time, she said, mostly to herself, her voice barely above a whisper. You married a billionaire and we treated you like... She stopped herself abruptly, but everyone standing on that porch had already heard the sentence finish itself in the sudden heavy silence. Like I wasn't worth anything. I finished for her, my own voice coming out steadier than I expected it to, steadier than I felt. Yeah, you did, Paige. Every single one of you did, storm or no storm, money or no money attached to my husband's name. That part isn't new information tonight. The only thing that's actually changed in the last 10 minutes is that you all finally know the truth. My father tried, weakly, awkwardly, to invite us both back inside out of the rain. To sit down and talk about all this properly like a family. Grant looked past him at the warmly lit house, at my mother's stricken face, at Paige's ruined makeup, and then looked back at me, waiting, letting the choice sit entirely in my hands. We don't need to go back in there, I said finally, before Grant could answer for me. We have somewhere much better to be tonight. We drove away from Millbrook Lane in near silence through the storm, my hand wrapped tightly in his the entire way, the wipers working steadily against the rain, until the SUVs finally slowed and turned through a set of tall iron gates I had somehow, in 8 full months of marriage, still never fully gotten used to seeing open for us. The house rose up out of the dark in the rain like something pulled straight from a dream. Pale stone and tall glass windows, warm golden light pouring out from nearly every room. A home Grant had technically inherited years earlier but rarely opened up fully, generally preferring the smaller, quieter place we shared together in the city. Tonight though he'd called ahead from the car. The staff had the grand front doors already standing wide open before our vehicle had even fully stopped, warm light and heat spilling out onto the drenched marble steps to meet us. Grant walked me up those wide steps with one arm wrapped firmly around my shoulders, and when he pushed open the tall double doors of that mansion, it wasn't simply a house he was showing me for the 100th time. It was a promise, repeated out loud in front of witnesses, for the very first time, that I would never again be the one left standing outside alone in a storm, waiting for someone to let me back in. Inside, wrapped in warm towels beside a fire someone on staff had already lit in the great room, I finally let myself cry. Not from humiliation this time, but from something closer to release, something that had been building quietly for years and finally had somewhere safe to go. Grant knelt down in front of me on the stone hearth, took both of my cold hands in his and said quietly, I should have shut that door on them a long time ago, Ren. I let it go on too long because you asked me to be patient with your family, and I respected that. But tonight was the very last time your mother, or anyone else in that house, ever gets to decide whether or not you belong somewhere. We sat together by that fire for a long time, not talking much, just letting the warmth slowly return to my skin, listening to the storm finally beginning to ease outside the tall windows. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I didn't feel like the daughter who never quite measured up. I simply felt like myself. In the weeks that followed, my family called constantly, almost every single day at first. My mother left long voicemails that alternated wildly between tearful apology and quiet self-justification. Paige sent a lengthy text message explaining that she didn't mean it like that, and that champagne had made her say things she didn't fully think through. My father wanted to start over the right way, now that we understand each other properly, as though understanding had only ever been a matter of finding out Grant's net worth. Grant never once told me what to do with any of it, not one single time. That choice, he said quietly, would always belong entirely to me, no matter what. I did eventually agree to meet my mother for coffee once, several months later, in a small shop nowhere near Millbrook Lane. I let her apologize, and I listened to every word of it without interrupting. Then I told her the truth as plainly as I could, that the money had genuinely never been the point, not for one single second of my marriage, and that what had actually hurt, for years before that storm and long after it, was standing in the rain because I wasn't a surgeon's wife or a name she could casually brag about at dinner parties. I told her that no mansion, no matter how grand its front doors, could undo years of quietly being treated like the family's afterthought. I told her honestly that I still loved her, and that I hoped one day we might rebuild something real between us, but that it would happen strictly on my terms this time in my own home with my own husband firmly beside me, not standing outside a locked gate somewhere, waiting patiently for permission to finally come in. Grant and I have built a life together now that has nothing left to prove to anyone, not to Paige, not to my parents, not to a single person who once thought a plain gray hoodie and a quiet voice meant a man had nothing worth knowing. And every single time it storms now, even years later, I still think back to that night on Millbrook Lane, not with bitterness anymore, but with something closer to quiet gratitude. Because it took a storm and a slammed side gate, and a mother who chose appearances over her own daughter, for me to finally fully understand that home was never a house I had to earn my way into. It was always a door that opened for me wide and warm, the very first time I truly needed it to, and it has stayed open ever since.